Good. Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So we have very good number of participants attending today. Which includes participants from publishers, society, university presses, and suppliers joining us from different time zones. So first of all, I'm delighted to extend a warm welcome to all of you who are joining today. So let me introduce myself. I'm Sureshkumar Parandhaman. I'm part of publishing solutions team at Integra. So I'm going to be the host today. So Integra has been conducting a series of webinars with our expert speakers and panelists to share their knowledge with the publishing communities ranging from academic, professional, education, and trade publishing. So against the backdrop, today webinar is more not just an event, but it is a collective experience where we are going to come together to explore and learn and exchange ideas. The focus for today is on the journal publishing, how AI is enabling journal publishing world. So I'm confident that the insights we will gain today will be both valuable and thought-provoking. Before we begin, so housekeeping instructions. So if you can't hear an audio, ensure that you choose the right speaker or audio output. All attendees will be muted by default. Please post your questions on the chat window. We will try and attend all the questions towards the end of the session. And unanswered questions during the session will be answered via follow-up email. All the participants of the webinar will also receive a recording of the session. Let me introduce our guest today. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Stewart Gardiner. Stewart, he is a global production director of Taylor & Francis Journal. Stewart started his career in publishing from Random House in New Zealand, and then with Journals of Bones and Surgery, and then Macmillan Education in UK. His interest includes workflow automation and the challenges of publishing content at scale across multiple channels and platforms. Welcome, Stewart. Thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Stewart. So let's begin now. So if you look at our episodes catered to various segments, today we are going to focus on this scholarly communication, especially focusing on the publishing lifecycle. If you look at it from the publishing lifecycle, author or researcher or the central focus, who creates the content, who consume the content, right? So if you look at in journal publishing, AI is an early adopter within the community. For example, if you look at compared to any other segments, journals have adopted different use cases with AI. So what we wanted to talk today is with Stewart. Stewart, if you can talk about at this juncture, if you look at this life cycle, what is your thoughts, especially when it comes to how AI is adopting in this particular life cycle, keeping in mind author as a central focus? So what are the different use cases that you could think of from a publisher perspective at a very high level?
Yeah, I think there is an enormous amount of activity and innovation in this space at the moment, Suresh. I was at the London Book Fair earlier this month, and it was striking just how much discussion was around the arrival of large language model, ChatGPT type AI in particular, and what the impact is on publishing. In our area, in journals publishing, as you say, we've been experimenting and deploying AI for some years, really in the area of language evaluation and language editing. But I think what we're seeing increasingly are new applications which kind of move upstream, so into the authoring and the content generation, are part of the life cycle. And there's certainly some challenges around the use of this technology to generate content, some of which is perfectly reasonable productivity enhancing type applications. Others applications are less ethical and involved generating content and passing it off as original work. So on that side, we see authors using it. We see it coming into our journals. We also see a lot of applications around content and research and matching, particularly in our space in journals. Finding peer reviewers is a classic case example. So the ability of tools to scan the literature, fingerprint the literature, and then identify and match relevant researchers to create reviewer selections, for example, is something that we've been looking at and experimenting with. I think the content validation and analysis piece, we see some interesting work going on in that area where the tools can scan a document and really do a lot of the kind of eyeballing, if you like, that a human operator would do that much more quickly and efficiently. Not necessarily to make decisions about whether content's fit to publish, but to support a human editor in evaluating content. Then I think some of the other applications which we've been looking at, maybe not so much in journals, but a little bit more in books, is content summarization, the ability to take a book chapter and write an abstract for it. That's been quite a bit of activity in the books business here at TNF. Really enabling content to become more searchable, more findable, more discoverable. The use of these tools to create some metadata for discovery is really, really useful. Format shifting was another thing that came up quite a bit at the London Book Fair. People talking about developing tools that can take a journal article and turn that into a video script, and then create, then use other types of AI to take that script and then turn that into video. Quite interesting experiments in that area. And I think underlying it really is, is a sense that in the publishing sector, that the large language models and these kinds of GPT type tools will become consumers of our content. And I think there is an appetite to look at a future where content can be licensed and sold to these types of AI companies, and really develop a kind of framework where we can work around trusted content with copyright and licensing ethically applied in a future world. And the Publishers Association here in the UK made a kind of plea for that shortly before the start of the London Book Fair. So I think the way in which content is consumed and the way in which researchers and academics scan the literature there will be enormous impacts from the use of the AI type tools. And I think we can see a future in where it is not just the production of content where there's augmentation, but also the kind of consumption of content. So, I guess the top level, the TLDR, really is that this technology is touching every aspect of publishing. Publishers are still working out how to approach that.
Got it, Stewart. I think you really kickstarted with so many possibilities around AI, different use cases that we can think of. And you touched upon, especially on the content validation, right? We try and do a lot of things in the downstream, but I think if you are able to validate the content upstream using AI-based technologies, two benefits there. One, you can create the content which is generated ethically compliant, and at the same time, from a technical aspect of it, you are able to address things at the very beginning of the process. And it is a very good information that you have mentioned, and a lot of use cases you spoke about peer review recommendations, reviewer recommendation. And you also touched upon a very interesting point, like making the journal content into a video based. And then with AI, is there any possible use cases that can be generated out of it? And these are some of the use cases that are very interesting, and publishers are talking about it. And I think it's a good start to talk about. So moving on to the next one part of it, which is adoption. I think some of the attendees and participants here are the different levels of in terms of AI adoption. Some could be beginning to start, some could be at a maturity level. They're trying to understand. So if you look at it, I know you've been with Taylor and Francis Ware for a very long time, and we've been working with you since 2001. And AI actually started like 4 or 5 years back. People were talking much about it. And yeah, and interesting applications that we were able to kind of come up with. You mentioned the language assessment, identifying the level of intervention that is needed on the language. So it has gone, if you look at it 4 or 5 years back and now, the technology has evolved like anything, right? So from that perspective, can you share your thoughts on some of the business challenges that TNF was trying to solve at that point in time? And what are the things that you approached in identifying that, and how did you solve that? And it will help the stakeholders who are in the call today to kind of understand how do they go about it, maybe at a different levels.
Yeah, I think our interest in the applications of AI really started back in the kind of 2016, 2017. We had been for some years actually working on developing technology and tools and automation to enable us to publish more quickly. So when you think about most journal publishers, there is a kind of effort that all of us are involved with to disseminate research quickly and efficiently, so that when an author publishes their work, we can get that paper out into the literature as quickly and as efficiently as we can. So we've been looking, 10 years or more, and we still it's not a project that's finished, for ways of saving time and effort in the publication cycle. And one of the things that perplexed us, I guess, was the kind of idea of that there was waste activity, that we were investing time and effort in places where we didn't need to. So we looked at things, at copy editing as being a very good example of that. 10 years ago, we had author survey data which showed us that the author satisfaction with the copy editing that we were applying to their manuscripts was actually highest for the most automated and the lightest touch editing, which surprised us. It seemed counterintuitive at the time. But I think what that reflected was the fact that authors wanted to see their work really enter the literature without the publisher messing about and making a whole lot of edits that they deemed to be unnecessary. So we looked at the Stanford NLP project of work that had come out of that, and really the ability to mathematically model language quality with tokens and so on, tokenization, and the ability really to score language quality numerically as being something that potentially could really offer us an opportunity to make a much better determination on what material, what papers, what articles should be copy edited and what articles didn't need to be copy edited. So we work with Integra, and with some of our other suppliers to develop something that we call contextualized copy editing, which was a really copy editing approach that was guided by the language quality in the paper. And that process really takes the article after it's been through the structuring process and the completeness and usability checking, and applies the language assessment tool to make a determination on whether the content goes through effectively three channels that we have available for us. So the track A, which is really content that doesn't need copy editing, that the mechanical style editing, the automated editing is sufficient. Track B, we find that by and large the manuscript is well written, but there are sections of it that the tool identifies as having problems, and that gives us a kind of guided copy editing model where the operator or the copy editor just goes to the places in the manuscript where there are problems, looks at those problems and resolves those issues. And of course, in that process, there's a kind of machine learning opportunity as we identify false positives and then feed that back into the tools. And then finally, we have the track C, which is the traditional copy editing approach, end-to-end human copy edit, often done onshore. So putting content through this tool, originally we thought it would really be applicable to fast-moving STM type journals, so medical journals, biomedicine, etc. What we actually found is that the uptake and the application could be applied across a whole range of journals from multiple different subject areas. So now I think about 80% of the content that we publish runs through this kind of assessment. And what we think we can see in the future is actually even more automation and application of AI, particularly around track B type content, and potentially surfacing the technology earlier, prior to acceptance, before an article goes out to review, giving the authors an opportunity to edit their paper or to use AI tools to resolve problems, edit, and get their work into the best possible shape even before it goes out to review. So, significant capabilities have developed in this language editing space, which I think are really interesting for us as a publisher and how we can use that. And really, it's always been a goal in publishing to try and serve a global market, in science publishing, in journals. Our contributors are global, our readership is global, science is global. So the ability to provide language improvement services to authors whose first language is not English, so that they can publish in English effectively and get their work into good academic English, I think is a great story for equity and for the ability of our global community of authors to contribute to the science and to the debate.
Yeah, I think it's a really valuable insights to the audience there. I think you touched upon 6-8 years back, we used Stanford NLP, and now when I see over a period of time for last 2 years, Gen AI coming into picture and LLMs coming into picture. So it is even giving more accuracy in terms of where we were like 7 or 8 years back. So even the technology is evolving. And like you mentioned, the use case that we're talking about is addressing the business challenges after acceptance, which is every manuscript is being evaluated, copy edited. But with this use case that you spoke about, it try and profile the content and then channelize the content depending upon the intervention that is needed, which is really good. And you spoke about, having this in at the time of submission. So which means that where their language is not the first language, the researchers and the authors, where they can use these tools, could be self-service tool or some author supporting tools. So this tools helps them at the time of submissions to kind of identify the language quality and use large language models to autocorrect the content, it's a good insights. And also that is going to help in the downstream. From a publisher point of view, it's a cost saving because you don't have to do copy editing everything. So it has been done by an author through self-service at the very end. So I think there are a lot of interesting story there, and this use case is definitely helpful for the publishers and the stakeholders who are joining the call today. So with this, we will try and bring up a poll. Prakash, if you can bring up a poll. What we wanted to do is to the audience. So what do you believe is the most significant challenge in adopting AI, from your perspective? So there are 4 options that are there. Maybe your uncertainty about where to start the workflow, or maybe there are too many options to make decisions to make it difficult. And also convincing the stakeholders is another, pain point, because how do you deal with content, the security aspect of it, and so on. And uncertainty about the long-term cost and benefits. So let's hear it from the audience. And we see that about 56% of the audience have chosen convincing the stakeholders and gaining their cooperation, right? So it is, what is your thought on it? Because this is across the organization, probably the team might listening about it, but how do they take this to the top stakeholders in terms of convincing them and also securing a support from their management and the team? What's your thought on that, Stuart?
I mean, I think when I think about the evolution of journals, publishing journals production, over time we've moved from what is really a kind of quite a cottage industry, very much old-fashioned editing model, to increasingly over time higher levels of automation and really what I call industrialization. And partly that's because journals publishing has become a lot more accessible. The amount of papers that are published these days is higher than it ever has been. Back in the 1980s, for example, it was very difficult to get into journals, and there was a scarcity involved in publishing because it was a very expensive activity. But as the global research community has expanded, the drive to publish more papers has expanded. So I think there's always been a bit of a tension in publishing between, if you like, the kind of the old school artisan editor and the industrialized model, and a fear of automation and industrialization in technology and the application of technology in publishing. So I think inevitably you are going to face challenges. People will say, well, the quality can't be any good, that you can't rely on technology to edit a paper, and so on. So the key thing for us was to identify those kinds of stakeholders that did have a progressive view on technology. And when a publisher like Taylor & Francis, we have 2,500 journals. So there's always going to be a mixture of views and levels of buy-in for novelty and new things. So you identify your editors and the journals that have got a desire to try new things and to apply technology in novel ways, and you work with those journals to really test the workflow and test the model. And only when you're really convinced that it's ready, that is the time to start bringing in other stakeholders and saying, look, this is something that we've been experimenting with. We think it's useful. We think it works, and start the discussion from there. There's a lot of the tools and applications out there are quite effectively vaporware. They're kind of conceptual applications rather than real world applications. And getting somebody to invest in something conceptual that hasn't really been built or tested or working on real world content is always going to be a lot tougher than saying, well, your competitor's using this tool and it's producing good results for them. Would you consider it? Getting that real world experience on live content with real journals so that you've got evidence is, I think, the critical thing.
I think, it is absolutely a right point that you mentioned, Stuart. Like, for the people who are, how do you convince, what Stuart is saying is like, do a test of a workflow, with your suppliers, with the real world example, and there are tools that are proven out there. So you try and test it, see if it works and meets your quality, and then take this experiment and showcase with your stakeholders and get their buy-in. I think that's the right way to go about it. Thank you for that suggestion and thoughts, Stuart. So now let's move on to the next one. We talked about all this, right? Some of the challenges, how do you go about it? So what are how do we implement, for example, from a TNF perspective? So you mentioned, you choose to go with the language part of it, which is the bottleneck in the process, which was taking more time. So what are the functional areas that you think, other than what we've spoke about, would TNF would want to implement it? And do you have any goals that you set? How was the journey overall? And how do you see that before and after implementation? What is the benefit that you realized? Because we talk about production, we talk about editorial and peer review. So what is your thought on that, Stuart?
Well, I mean, in our world of production, if you like, we typically talk about the triangle of cost, quality, and speed. And the old adage is that you can have two of those, but you can't have all three. Now, I think what we saw in AI is actually you can have all three. If you deploy the tools right, you can improve speed, you can improve quality, and obviously you can save money. And quality is difficult to measure, but cost and speed are quite easy to measure. So from our perspective, from my perspective, the application of technology in a cost-effective way that's going to deliver time savings and cost savings is, those are the opportunities that we look for in our world, and we consider that to be win-win. So those easy to measure things of the amount of money that you're spending and the time that it takes for content to go through the pipeline are things that we look at all the time, and we're looking at improving. The quality piece is harder, and that's where the relationship with the supplier and the in-house expertise and understanding how these tools work and what they're doing is the really critical thing. So at Taylor & Francis, we have a head of copy editing whose remit includes understanding how the language scoring works, understanding the thresholds that we assign between different levels of quality, and how we are going about measuring it and making sure that it's well controlled and consistent across our suppliers. So, we shouldn't underestimate that you can't outsource all of the decision making around these tools, and every application needs to be carefully calibrated by the customer to get the goals that they're looking for in their in their content life cycle. So I think those would be my high level observations on that.
Okay. So how do you, I could pick up, so which means one is like, setting the parameters, setting the benchmarks from the quality aspect of it and the cost saving aspect of it. But how do you bring in an element of the author experience in the whole things to it?
Well, you have to work on the assumption that for most authors, getting their work out there and published quickly is desirable, and it's a positive feature for them. You also have to work on the assumption that for many authors, having their language mangled by the publisher, or the publisher introducing errors, is a dissatisfier. That's a countervailing force. So I think the author experience certainly drove our early investigations into the AI tools. As I mentioned earlier, the survey data that we gather every time an author or every time we publish an article, we ask the authors to give us some feedback on their experience, and we ask them to rate things like copy editing and the quality of the typesetting and the speed in which the article was published. So out of that data, you can really put a customer experience lens onto the model. And we found that all of the innovations that we've done in language editing and language assessment and copy editing has generated positive effects in terms of customer experience data when we look at it.
Very, very interesting. I think with the survey, if you see better results on the survey, so which means that the customer is happy with, which is the author or the researchers are happy. So that's a good data points to look at the satisfaction. So now let's move on to the next poll, where we would like to ask audience, so which are the areas, maybe Prakash, if you can bring up, so which of the areas do you think would benefit most from adopting AI? One is authors using AI before the manuscript submission, or editors in manuscript review before acceptance, or copy editing and production, which is the speed, quality, and the cost, and then the researchers and author for content discovery. So we will give a couple of minutes to see the responses. I think we see again, which area do they think would be the most benefit? On our screen, it says about 56%. I think we were talking about this use case quite a lot, Stewart. Copy editing and production, which gives them the speed and the quality and the cost. As you mentioned, speed and the cost is definitely there. The quality is sometimes subjective. So what is your thoughts on this from the whole reply that you see?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one has to remember that the kind of goals and objectives of authors and publishers aren't always 100% aligned. For many authors, particularly in some fields, there really is a productivity drive. They have to publish a number of articles to get tenure or to get promoted, and the ability to take shortcuts using some technology such as generative AI, it must be very tempting for some authors. We know it is, because we see examples of prompts being left in papers. There was a case for an Elsevier paper earlier this month that was did the rounds in Twitter. So we know that there is use of tools, in generative tools, in the authoring process, and some of that is not necessarily going to be a good thing, particularly if you're using the tool to generate text and then passing it off as your own work and thoughts. On the other hand, if you're format shifting something, so let's say you've got an algorithm that you've written in Python, and you want to turn that into a flowchart to put it as an image in your paper, and you use an AI tool to do that. There are productivity enhancing aspects of these technologies which are extremely beneficial. So publishers are in a difficult place. They want to support our author communities, and we don't want to pretend that the use of these tools isn't happening. but we want to kind of for it to happen in a way that's really guided by ethics, and the primary ethical goal is that authors must own the work that they say that they author. They must take responsibility for it. If a tool creates errors and inserts them in a manuscript, that is no excuse. You as the author are responsible for validating the content before you submit it. So the difference between productivity and unwelcome shortcuts in the authoring part of the process is something that I think everybody is alive to. And when you look at it from a publisher's point of view, we have submissions to journals are going up faster than revenues for journals are going up. Acceptance rates, sometimes are under a lot of pressure because we have more and more content coming through. It's harder to find reviewers. There's only a limited finite pool of people prepared to review journal articles. So putting productivity tools in the hands of millions of authors, we can see that there's a real possibility that submission that might drive enormous growth in submissions to journals, and some of that will be quite low quality work, which as a publisher we have to filter out, we have to reject, and we can't monetize that content. It's rejected, it doesn't have value for us, but it still takes work to analyze it, to look at it, to validate it and review it. So as a publisher, we think that the benefits of AI in content authoring are a kind of double-edged sword for us.
Perfectly. And I think you rightly pointed out, if you put productivity related tools in the hands of, the authors and researchers, and definitely you will see the content is getting created, a lot of research. I know there are challenges with publishers especially, and there is this pressure in terms of the acceptance rate and the number of submissions that are coming up. Of course, the production tools are going to help, but at the same time, there is a scrutiny that needs to happen, and you need the right relevant tools for that to kind of scrutiny that. So that's a nice thought. So moving on to just some of the reflection and lessons learned. I think we touched upon on certain things. So in this journey, so like I mentioned, some of the things are critical challenges. So from how industry should look at what are the insights that industry colleagues who have joined in the call should see this as a benefit, and what is your suggestions in overcome some of the challenges?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the kind of the overcoming the challenges as you mentioned, my gut feeling is that most publishers know that there is this world of technology and AI that is that is transformative and will transform the way that content is created and content is consumed. But at the core of our mission, there is still a valid purpose in matching content to readers, or matching subscribers to journals, or authors to journals to publishing, and finding audiences for work and finding audiences for content, and that there are great things that these tools can potentially offer us as that matchmaker. So for me, it feels like there is a level of alignment around the potential for tools to help us in our mission. The question is really, how do we do this in a way that is ethical, that is compliant with copyright and compliant with licensing, that is compliant with data protection, with GDPR, these are some of the critical things that that create warning flags when we start talking about the use of AI, and we need to work through those and have good answers for every one of those and for every tool.
Good. Thank you, Stewart. So let's move on to the next one. How do we see? We have another 10 minutes before we actually begin the demo. So this will be the last question. So how do you see the future of journal publishing is getting into? So how you see the role of editors and the reviewers will see change in next 3 to 5 years? Is there any new model that will come up in journal publishing space because of all the new age technologies that are coming up?
Yeah, so I think inevitably, with all of the productivity enhancements that the AI tools can deliver, we're going to see more content being produced, and that creates a problem because we don't have we don't have more hours in the day, and we don't to read the content. So I think one of the things that I expect to see is more innovation around content consumption, summarization, matching content to interest areas, the use of tools for discovery, and for effectively mining, data and text mining, and that will have implications on the outputs, the formats that we publish content in. I think we're already beginning to see actually the weakening of the PDF as the primary output for journal articles, and for many years, going back to the 1990s when PDFs arrived on the scene and we started online publishing back in '97 in the journals. 95% of downloads where authors had an option was the PDF. Full text views, typically people wouldn't read on screen, they would download the PDF, come back to it. But we're getting to see more interest in other formats, not just for accessibility, such as EPUB, but also XML, for example, because those formats are easier for machines to consume. And I think the way in which content formats and different types of products, effectively, that we sell is going to change, because there will be more intermediaries between our readers and the content. I think that the kind of format shifting type of benefits of AI potentially could create new products. I mentioned video before, but there's a whole range of things that these tools could potentially be used to enable us to deliver.
Yeah.
Things like taking a journal paper and turning it into a PowerPoint presentation for somebody to present at a conference. Being able to do that with one click of the button would benefit many of our authors. So I can see lots of opportunities for companies that have innovative tech that they can deploy in a cost-effective way, that publishers can partner with and potentially explore different types of content, different types of outputs, so that we can actually take our content and really transform it into multiple different types of new channels and new ways of communicating with audiences. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be in the industry.
Sure, Stuart. I think there are a lot of possibilities that we could see. I think I can see the evolution that was happening, especially in journal publishing. More and more open access, a lot of articles getting published. And at the same time, there are challenges out there, but I think there are tools out there to kind of find it out. So we'll take 5-10 minutes to kind of show whatever the use cases that we're talking about today. So I'll try and give you, I think there are many tools out there. Suppliers have their own tools. There are companies who develop tools based on AI. So I'll talk about some of the use cases, how it looks like and what can help the publishers and the research community to make use of those AI-based tools. So let me share my screen, and I'll try and bring up I wanted to share the entire screen. Just let me know if you're able to see my screen, Stuart. You're able to see it?
Yeah, it's come through just now, Suresh.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just wanted to talk about some of the AI-based solutions that we have. The one which is on the left-hand side is purely the tools that are used in the upstream. We call it as autopilot. On the right-hand side, purely on the downstream. We call it as content pilot. Today, I'm going to focus on the language assessment and then the guided editing, which Stuart is talking about. One of the use case which helped in terms of identifying the language quality and then channelizing according to the quality of the language and helping editors to do things quickly. And then there are certain tools that we have which can be used at the submission stages, and you can show that now. So if we look at, I'm going to just do this one. So what you're seeing on the screen is, I think, you can do this in Word, or you can also integrate this with your web application. So what it does is, once the mechanical stuff is done, so the NLP tools, we are talking about generative AI tools, LLM tools, can assess the quality of the language. In this case, the quality of the language is 92%. So every publisher will have their own percentage. Depending upon, Stuart was also talking about track A doesn't require copy editing, track B, which requires only the highlighted portion, not to read the entire article. So this will help copy editors to kind of take a call. So it will tell you what error in the sentence, and then the copy editor will take a call in terms of correcting it, right? So this will have both grammar, spelling, punctuation, hyphenation. But the difference that you see is this is customized for the scientific content. So this is the one use case, instead of reading the entire manuscript, so you can just look at, depending upon the quality of the content, like I said, like Stuart was saying. So if their first language is English, then of course the article written would be better quality. The one, where their first language is not English, we need to do an assessment and see what real intervention is needed on the content. It could be less editing or could be heavy editing. So depending on that, you can enable it, something like this. So this is one use case. Another use case that I wanted to talk about is, I'll bring up my slide again. We can talk about the checks that you can do. I think Stuart was talking about the content validation at the time of submission. Like, there are various technical checks that can happen in terms of the completeness and usability. I think as part of the editorial desk review, so you would have manuscript screening for the initial analysis. So it could be technical, it could be research integrity checks, right? So what we have, I'm just going to bring up. So the author pilot, this can also be integrated with submission platforms. So when you choose the manuscript and when you put it the manuscript here, so it will give you two reports. One is on the technical aspect of it, the other one is on the language aspect of it. So from the technical aspect of it, you can go and look at on the technical aspect of it, the authorship and the ethical. It not only talks about, you have it or not, but it will also tell the exact location, what is missing, and provide little more details from the manuscript. It can extract and provide you the information. So and then you can also link it to your journal specific validation here. And the other report that we have is the language report. For the same article that I wanted to open, you would see that the language quality here is not great, which is 75%. And it will highlight the areas, not only the language aspect of it, it will also highlight the DEI checks, for example, here, the female doctor in the content, and inconsistency in the capitalization and so on. So if author sees that the quality of the language is not adequate, then they can initiate doing the self-service editing, which is, it does very intensive edit. So I'm going to download an output of that, which processed. So this is an example of an article which is non-native speaker, non-native author has written the content. You would see that the level of edits that can happen, all great things to generative AI and LLM models. So it can edit at the level of, but then you would, the author will be the final, authority to kind of accept it and then resubmit it again. So what it does is, at the when author submits it, so author will be able to kind of identify things that are missing, and then the ethical related, the authorship related, they can update it, and then if the language is not good, they can use the self-service to kind of automatically edit. Traditionally, there would be some human would be reviewing it as part of an author service support, but with all the new technology that is coming up, it will help doing things pretty quickly. Quickly, I wanted to talk about, so we all know about there are different applications. How do we get started? So at Integra, we have a platform, AI platform, where you can, as a publisher or as an end user, you can create a prototype pretty quickly, and you can deploy the applications pretty quickly. What it benefits is the cost, because we have all the peripherals that are been already created. You just make use of those models, and there are agents that we have already created in our library, so that can be make use of it. So when I say different agents, so I'll try and bring in, for example, we have different applications here. So the one that I showed a couple of minutes back is the author pilot. There are other applications like the chatbots, the knowledge discovery, creating assessment. This is especially for the education content, creating alt text for the images. So as a publisher, you can subscribe it, you can try it, and you can create your own data pipeline. You can create your own prompt configurations. So this will help publishers to kind of test, experiment things pretty quickly. So for example, when I have iAlt, just to quickly tell you how it looks like. So I can drag and drop the different type of images in terms of, it could be a graph, it could be a math, it could be a chemical drawing, it could be a photographs. The AI tool can automatically classify the image and then use the appropriate models, use the appropriate prompts, and then produce you the alt text that is needed. I think Stewart also touched upon the accessibility. Accessibility is another key. So going forward, all the friendless title, as European Accessibility Act is coming up, by 2025, all the friendless title needs to be compliant. And by 2030, I think you need to have all the backlist title to be compliant. So the AI tools will help in kind of, creating the scale in which we are talking about a scale, right? So if we have to do things manually, it might not possible, but through AI, so you can make it scale. But with the human intervention, it's not something that 100% you completely rely on AI. It will try and give you the information, the outputs that is needed, and then it can be enhanced. For example, here, if you look at it, it's a chart, right? So it gives you an information of what the image is all about. And then on top of it, the alt text reviewer can look at it and do it. So these are different use cases that we can think of. And there are many tools out there in the market. The thing is that take a step, do some experiment, and then try and convince your organization, how you can take this up. So this is a quick demo that I thought I wanted to showcase. Maybe we will give a couple of minutes. If there are any questions, we can take. I know we are running out of time. We'll take 1 or 2 questions if there are questions, and then we'll close it. Just picking up. Okay, so I think one questions that we can take is like, what is the future of peer review with increase in open access continuing to grow? What role will AI play? So this was one of the questions in the chat. So what is your thought on that, Stewart?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. There was an interesting paper published out of Stanford University last month, a preprint, actually, it wasn't published, about the spike in similar descriptions being used in computer science peer review reports, which indicated that computer science reviewers were actually using tools like GPT, Gen AI tools to write reviews. So I think no doubt there will be reviewers using some of these tools to summarize papers and to potentially kind of write reviews. So one of the things that we're working on is really kind of provide some guidelines on what level of use that is appropriate for AI tools in the peer review process. But I think in the general question, the better application for AI in review, in peer review in particular, is the ability to kind of find reviewers and to match them to papers, to identify reviewers that have really got very specific research interests, so that we can ask them to review a paper which they'll have a higher likelihood of accepting, because that paper is really specific to their interests and their research interests, and that's when you will see the highest reviewer acceptance rates. So there's some really promising stuff out there in that space that we're quite interested in.
Thank you, Stewart. Thank you for that answer. And we will take some of the questions that have come. We will try and respond to user through emails. If there are any questions, you can reach out to us. And thank you so much, Stewart, for joining us today. And it was wonderful insights. I think the attendees who have participated today, I think a lot of message to take away. And I'm sure it is a useful session for them. Before we close this webinar, we would like to have a very small announcement. So we do this kind of series of webinars on AI. So we will be also soon announcing the other areas. So today it was specific to journals episode, and we will also be having a similar kind of an episodes in the education, trade, and professional area. So we will be announcing that in a couple of days to come on the dates. So once again, thanks everyone. Thanks, Stewart, for joining us today. I know it's going, you have a very busy schedule, and really thank you for allotting your time, taking your time, and talking with us today. So great weekend. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Good day and good night. Thank you.